Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspin and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic movie diaries and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
My name is Nelson Aspin, and you are back with some Titanic talk with my lovely co-host, Alexandra Boyd, nowadays best known as filmmaker, writer, director, and producer of the new documentary Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries. So this is where we gather to talk all things Titanic. And Alexandra, this is the magic of social media, is that through our community of Titaniacs, we have found an esteemed author. Thanks to Instagram, we found him. My book is in the mail. Amazon is not fulfilling my immediate gratification needs. It is taking a few days for me to get my copy in the mail. But in the meantime, even better, we have the man himself. Will you do the honors?
Simon Medhurst, welcome to Titanic Talk. And you're there in the UK. Whereabouts in the UK are you speaking to us from?
Yeah, I'm from Essex. That's the birthplace, or it's Chelmsford, the birthplace of radio. So it's where Marconi set up his offices and factories. So it's got quite a good connection for me with Marconi. So that's been. I didn't know that before I moved there, but yeah, in the UK, in Essex.
Well,
so,
I'm actually I'm from Suffolk, which is one county above Essex. So I'm very familiar with East Anglia and the flatness and the gorgeous of the gorgeous bleakness in winter. It's where I set my first feature film on the the Suffolk coast there. So I rather like how lovely and bleak and windy and wet it is, which will sound very strange to a lot of people. But
well, you asked where he's coming from, and I thought the answer was going to be coming from the promenade deck of the RMS Titanic. And you look like something out of a Ken Marshall painting there, Simon. So we should also say that the name of your book is Titanic Day by Day, 366 days. Yes. That counts for a leap year. So you're covered in the event of a leap year. Let's start with your Titanic credentials. It's pretty, as Titanic credentials go, yours are pretty pure. You are the great-grandchild of Quartermaster Robert Hitchens, who was actually at the helm of the ship when she hit the iceberg. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Robert Hitchens is my great-grandfather. I thought I might show that picture. It might give a little bit of an idea, really. That's a picture that I grew up with. That's me as a baby. This is my mother, and this is my what I was always told was my real grandmother, because I didn't grow up with any Titanic knowledge or any. It was about in my 20s I started collecting Titanic memorabilia, signatures and models, books and things. But it wasn't until I was 45 that I found out that I was actually related.
Why wouldn't they have? I would have assumed that would have been part of your family lore, especially as your great-grandfather survived. We should point that out. He survived the Titanic.
Yeah, he did survive,
he was in charge of Lifeboat 6.
That's correct. I mean, the thing was that I didn't know who my birth father was till I was 45. So, and then I found out that he said to me, "Oh, yes, I took that photo. And that lady who's your grandmother is Robert Hitchens' daughter." So so that's how I found out I was actually related in the end.
On your own, you had started to be fascinated by everything to do with the Titanic, which is not unusual. Certainly, we are learning many people were just drawn to this story at a young age. But what a mind-blowing experience to then know you have this direct line to somebody who was there and experienced the tragedy.
Yeah, it was a bit mind-blowing, because you're going from being a Titanic enthusiast and enjoying all those things to suddenly realizing you're actually a direct relative. But not just somebody on the ship. It had to be Robert Hitchens who was at the helm. So yeah, that it was a bit mind blowing, and it's been a bit of a journey since. And I actually found out in 2012 which was quite unusual as well, I think.
So it was after the James Cameron movie. So you'd probably gone to see the movie a few times, as we all did. We didn't just see it once. I went 8 times. Now. So tell us about the experience of finding out and then seeing the movie the next time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I hadn't seen the movie before because I'd been fascinated by A Night to Remember, and then it was afterwards that I actually saw the film. So it's been that sort of a journey with sort of it's been more recent actually that I've got more interested in the new film, if you like, for me.
I have to say something about Paul Brightwell, who plays your great grandfather in the film. We would walk around with lanyards on with our names because security was very important, and we all had our names and then our character names on. So mine was Alexandra Boyd, First Class Woman, and Paul had one that said Quartermaster Hitchens, which I just loved. So and one of our previous podcasts, we talked to Rebecca Klingler, who played Mother at Stern. So she was Rebecca, Mother at Stern. Paul was Paul Quartermaster Hitchens. Like everyone was sort of like a one-word name that was their first name and their character name. That's just how we identified each other, because the time went on, and you just identified people by their characters. But of course, I never shot a scene with Paul, so you never knew really what everyone else was doing unless they were in your moment. Like for me, it was First Class Passengers, and I remember that. But then you saw people doing their roles that you had known very well in the bar drinking margaritas, like, oh, that's what he did, oh, that's the part that, and it was just a full circle experience to see Paul Brightwell doing that. And of course he has that amazing moment in the lifeboat with Molly Brown, which you'll probably tell us a little bit if how true that was, but it's very dramatic. So I wonder if that rang true for you, or if it felt a little.
I mean, it's been quite a journey really to find different people that I've been in contact with over the years, like Emmett James and Liam Toohey, the people that I've been able to get in contact with recently and in the last few years, which has been quite special really, because it gives me that conversation starter, and they're able to talk about their character, and it's a mixture of what's real life and maybe what's acted, but it all comes together.
Yes.
Well, nothing starts a conversation like just Titanic. I mean, we Alexandra and I have found that if you could walk up to a stranger in the street, and if you just say the word Titanic, chances are you can start a chat.
I did it in the film. I just stuck a microphone in people's faces in New York, and I 9 out of 10. Only one guy was like, no, I don't care, and everybody else was like, oh yes, had something to say about that film.
I think the fact that it's been brought out again has literally brought in a whole new generation.
Yes.
In 97 was it? It brought a whole generation at that point. From 1985, you had Generation there when it was found. Then you had this next generation when the film came out, and now it's come out again. I think it's brought a whole new generation out of youngsters as well. So,
and do you go into schools and share the story?
I think that's one of my favourite parts, actually, is going into schools. I've got one. I'm going to be doing it in a library with some children and that. So those sort of things are very special, because some of them. I've done it twice, or I've done it in 2 different ways. Once where they've not had any Titanic story taught at all, and you're telling them for the first time, and then you have a group where the teachers have done a whole class lesson on it for weeks, and then you're going in there and they've got a lot of the answers already, and then it becomes quite challenging because they know more than I do. So I normally take in lots of different bits and pieces to talk about. I don't know, simple things like you have the cups that were used. They were taken down to Titanic in the baskets, and then they come back up this sort of size. So Dick Barton, who went down to Titanic, he managed to get me one of those, which was quite quite cool. So just little things like that are able to sort of just tell people, the children, about it, and it gives them a real life. And also you talk about Marconi, you can talk about Robert Hitchens, you can talk about the ship, and there's just so much, isn't there?
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned this, because right after the movie came out and was such a hit, I went in. A friend of mine was a third grade school teacher, and I went into her class with my little lump of Titanic coal and was telling the kids about the stories. But the kids were already so savvy that the project was everybody drew their own picture of the Titanic sinking, and it was quite amazing and a wonderful exercise like that. I wish I'd had something like that when I was in third grade. Yeah. Since you found out late in life about your great-grandfather's identity, what was the forensic experience after that? How did you track him down? Did you have anybody in the circle that actually knew him, or did you really start from scratch?
For me, it's from scratch, but I knew obviously Sally Nielsen, who'd already written a book on Robert Hitchens called The Man Who Sank Titanic, The Troubled Life of Robert Hitchens. So
was that his label? Is that what came out of all of this?
I think she maybe used that title to do what it's done to you, just catch your mind. But I think actually the whole book is to show that actually it wasn't anything to do with him. He was following orders completely. But that book was a help to me because it gave me a background to Robert's life. Because he died in 1946, you know, I didn't get to meet him, 1956, I didn't get to meet him. But what happened was there was a tray that was passed on from, well, he used to go on a lot of journeys. You know, after Titanic, he was traveling all around the world. And on his trips, he would take this tray, which he would use obviously for his meals or whatever. And he gave that to his daughter when he come back off the trips, which was then passed to my father, and now it's passed to me, which is basically this massive, great tray, a map of the world, which he would have used on his journeys. Beautiful. And this is the only thing I know of that Robert Hitchens ever had at all. That's the only thing. So there's no family heirlooms. This is the only thing that we know that Robert Hitchens owned and then passed on down the family, and now I have it, so to look after. I'm the custodian of that one.
Have any other stories come down through your great-grandmother and grandmother and mum that he told about Titanic, or was it a little bit like people from the First and Second World Wars that just wouldn't talk about it? It was like it was a terrible thing, and they sort of shut it away and never spoke about their experience. You know, now we want to talk about everything, you know, process everything. But that generation very much shut down and said, right, that was that, and they moved on.
Yeah, I mean, Robert had a really troubled life. He did have a really troubled life. It's quite easy to see. You can search that out for later on in life. But he had, you know, he clearly had post-traumatic stress disorder. He had, and I know a lot of them did. You think of Fred Fleet and a few others that suffered afterwards. And I think with alcohol, depression, all those things that happened, and also you had the depression in the 30s. So there was a lot that was going on that caused a lot of difficulties for Robert. But he did do a couple of news articles in the mid-30s, which I have a couple of those, where he's been interviewed. But I think generally they didn't speak much of it. It wasn't really anything spectacular, if that makes sense. I think he must have done a few of these things, which I don't know whether you can possibly see it. You may not be able to see it there, but he did write out. I think you can probably see it. Just about read it there.
Is that the time? So he was chronicling the time. He was recording the time.
Yeah, he did all that, and I mean his handwriting's immense. I've actually got a couple of letters that he wrote. Which is phenomenal, because he does talk about, as I read it here, his book talks about being shipwrecked. Was it shipwrecked through shipwreck, explosion, from pirates in China, from 3 times from drowning through shipwreck. So those things he's escaped from during his life, up to the point of getting on other ships and things. So he had quite an eye.
He really did live through the adage that worse things happen at sea.
Yes.
That it wasn't just Titanic, but pretty much anywhere on the high seas, you were exposing yourself to pirates and storms and icebergs and all sorts of things. My gosh, a real mariner's life.
Yes, and I think obviously my grandmother was born in 1914. So if Robert hadn't survived, then all of this side of the family would not be here. So it's quite. I think when you start thinking of the story more, and you realise that there was only 712 people survived, Robert was one of those. And with an awful lot of those were first class Americans. There was a lot of higher, the echelon of that day that survived. And Robert only survived really because he was a quartermaster, and every quartermaster survived because every quartermaster was given charge of a lifeboat. So that's really the reason he survived. Whereas we know,
thank goodness we wouldn't be having the pleasure of this conversation. No. Where such a troubled life he had, where is he laying to rest now?
He's actually in Aberdeen. He was on the English trader off the coast of Aberdeen when he had a heart attack. And I think for years they thought he'd been buried at sea. But Sally Nielsen, who had done a lot of research, found where he was actually buried in Aberdeen Cemetery. And in recent years, I was able to organise for a headstone to be put there. So that was quite a good thing. So I was able to go up to Aberdeen and go with my father and be there to have it unveiled. And that was a very, very precious thing to actually be able to have a headstone for him, because it was basically like a pauper's grave. So I think there was two other people buried there in the same place, not Titanic related. They were just other mariners that obviously were buried there in later years or whatever you.
And what a nice circle for you as well, nice completion of the story that, really has come to you so much later in life, even though you felt this connection to the story of Titanic.
I think it's more of a responsibility now. Yeah, it's more of a responsibility because being a fan or an enthusiast, you can step back and maybe have an interest in other things as well, which we all do. But when you realise that you're actually directly related, there's that responsibility to make sure that maybe Robert's putting over in a better light than maybe he's been put over in years, but also to be able to pass on the story and the interest to the next generation, which is for me quite important. That's why I do the Instagram, really, just to encourage more younger generation, which actually I was looking at the stats to see what age group, and actually I was quite surprised. It's more than 25 to 35.
Sorry, I dragged you down. You'd have been even younger if I weren't following you. But we should mention your Instagram account is Titanic_memorabilia. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. It's interesting because I started a Facebook group called Titanic Memorabilia years ago, and I thought that I started it up because I thought there wasn't really any Titanic fans. So I thought, well, I'll if I set this up, this Facebook group, people will maybe jump on, and there'll be a few, and then it went up to, I think it's about 6,000 or so now. But then I thought, well, do you know what? I'll do the Instagram, which connects up with that a little bit. So that's why it's called Titanic_memorabilia, because it just sort of followed on from that, really. And I've kept
it's marvelous. It's marvelous. I mean, there's and like your book, day by day, you're always posting something of interest. So even if it takes a couple of minutes to look at it, if it's a film clip or if it's just a quick 30-second scan, there's always a bit of Titanic to enjoy each day for those Titaniacs like us. But so as for memorabilia, you showed us your great-grandfather's amazing tray with the map of the world there. What are some of the other things you collect?
I think probably books is one of my problem areas, I think. So I've got hundreds of Titanic books, which, to be honest, it was a help when I did my book, because the idea of my book wasn't necessarily a storybook, or it was designed more to be able to be picked up, have on your coffee table, and be able to just pick up today's date, because it's done in a diary form so that you can go day by day. So it's more set out. So every day has its own page, which has the births and deaths and some, I don't know, facts and figures and survivor quotes and parts from the inquiry, which took about 7 years to do.
A Titanic task to log all of that.
It took me about 7 years. Yeah, 7 years work. And I'm thankful for, I'm very thankful for the internet, because without the internet, I'll be honest, it gives you all that information that you're able to search out. And I wanted to get it all in a form that rather than people having to search out all over the place, they can go to one place, pick the book up, look at today's date, and find all that information. And what I tried to do was to make sure, which wasn't possible in every case, was to find somebody that was in the births and deaths of that day, and then see if there was a survivor quote, obviously for those survived, and maybe a fact or something that would connect that day up. So it was hard work.
You would win every single Titanic trivia contest in
Mastermind.
every pub that was ever held, I would think.
I'd need my book with me.
I was going to say, as long as you can retain it all, yes.
Yeah.
I'll
be honest.
Obviously, your great-grandfather would be your quote-unquote favorite character in the Titanic story. I have Milton Long as my particular person for reasons that are clear in Alexandra's documentary. But who are some of your other favorite in the legacy and the legend of Titanic? Of whom are you a fan, or maybe a critic?
I think Thomas Andrews. I've got a soft spot for Thomas Andrews. I expect a lot of people have got a soft spot for Thomas Andrews.
The builder, the architect, and the builder. Yes.
So I think Murdoch as well. We sort of, he gets lost really in the story, but he did save an awful lot of lives due to the fact that he on his side of the ship he would have women and children first.
Lightoller too. The chat on Titanic, James Cameron's Titanic, that Lightoller, and that comes out in Night to Remember. But also Ioan Gruffudd's character. He's Fifth Officer Lowe, I believe.
Right.
Went back. The one boat that went back.
Yes.
And I remember one actor pointing at Ioan and going, "Him. He's the hero. He's the hero of this film." I was like, oh. And again, didn't really know, hadn't seen them shoot the scene, so it was fun to have that all completed for us.
In the film version of Night to Remember, Lightoller is clearly the hero of the story.
Yes.
It's interesting. You could tell it from anybody's point of view. I mean, we could do a Hitchens movie and make him the hero, I'm sure.
Yes, I mean, I think Robert's always had a bit of a bad press. But it's interesting because I woke up in the other night and I was thinking about Robert, which is a strange thing to do, but there you are. And it was really the fact that he was ordered to do harder starboard, and then he went harder port to go round the iceberg. If that order hadn't have come, that iceberg could have ripped right down the side, all the way down the side, in which case you could well have had a capsized Titanic and no survivors. Which I'd never really, it just sort of come to mind really, because it went round the iceberg and then came back in, it came away from the ship. It didn't carry on all the way down the ship. So it dug in, and of course it was fatal for the ship. But if it had carried on and gone all the way down the side and carried all the way down, then no doubt that could well have capsized the ship. There wouldn't have been time for wireless operators to get hold of anybody. And all those things. So it just made me think that sometimes, what Robert did, he did to the letter. And because he did it to the letter, it meant that at least 712 people did survive. So there's a lot more to the story maybe than we give credit maybe.
Always. And with all those moving parts and all those, this comes up again and again, doesn't it, Nelson, that, every single person, every survivor and every victim has the most tragic story. And it literally has rippled down through the generations to these young people. This is the thing that comes out in the documentary. I'm interviewing these super fans who know not just every frame of the film, which was sort of their starting point, because then it just goes on and on and on to
Yes.
everything to do with the history of the Edwardian era and the
Yes.
kind of knives and forks they used and the corsets they wore and everything social, cultural, and it kind of seems to all be encapsulated in this one ship. And Nelson and I talked the other day, if the ship had not sunk, nobody would be talking about a successful ship.
No.
We're talking about
probably
the
been
ship
used in
because
the
of
war
its tragedy. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Simon, how do you feel about sailing? Are you nautically inclined? Do you go on cruises?
No, I don't think my wife would let me go on a boat. And she won't let me tell anybody what my history is when I do if I was to get on one either. So, no, I think. She
thinks you're going to scare them. She thinks you're going to scare them. Don't give him the helm. Keep him away from that wheel.
You're just not allowed to go to the bridge at all. Just stay away. But yeah, no. I was going to ask a question actually, because obviously with the Titanic, there are so many aspects of the Titanic. So for me, it's the people thing. It's about the actual people themselves. So with my book, it's all to do with what the people saw and felt at that time. So all the quotes in that are whether they're in the lifeboat or they're speaking about it. So that they're all those things of what they felt at that moment. So what you get in the book is what you're actually getting the feeling of the people as they tell their story. But obviously there are so many different aspects of it. So there is the technical side, the 3 million rivets and the 5,000 tons of coal, and then there's what you're talking about, like the Edwardian dress and that sort. So what part of it is it that holds you, or is it all of it?
For me,
both of you.
Well, for me, it certainly was the research that I did for my audition, which Nelson helped me with, because he had, like you, he had a library full of information and videos and, a lump of coal that had, been exhumed from the wreck. And I was like, right, he's my starting point. And then I wrote a monologue and, James Cameron saw a video recording of me performing this monologue, and I didn't get the part that I auditioned for, but he gave me another role. He was like, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. Like that was how I won my role, was from this research, which was so wonderful. And so, I really knew I'd only scratched the surface. So walking onto the set and being part of somebody else's and wide research, not just James Cameron, but Peter Lamont, the art director, and Deborah Scott, the costume designer, you really, really felt like you were on Titanic in 1912, and that was what was required of me, to look like that and behave like that. So why would you not have an indelible sort of link to the story? And also what happened was I invited everybody I had got to know to write a diary, like write this stuff down. This is movie history. So as a filmmaker now, it's fascinating to me to have recorded the experience of us as the smaller supporting role actors, but tie it in with the history, because they're intrinsically linked. So, my admiration for it starts with my admiration of James Cameron for casting me and then allowing me this experience, which 25 years later, people still want to talk to you about. You talk about Facebook and Instagram, we have super fans in the film because they found me. Oh, you're the lady that winks at, Jack when he comes into the dining room. I was like, yes, I am. Thank you for noticing. They noticed everything. And again, the young people, they were all young, 6, 11, 13 when they saw this film for the first time, and blew their young minds. And now as adults, 25 years later, they are still just so that's it's as much a film / cultural connection that I have. And Nelson, you speak briefly about
well, I had been a childhood freak about maritime disasters, specifically for steamships. So Titanic was one, but there was also the Andrea Doria and the Lusitania and the and fictional, give me the Poseidon, so I was an equal opportunity maritime disaster person person until I glommed onto Milton Long, who was a first-class passenger, and just began having an intense interest in an individual. So it became more of a personal story for me. But now I do want to ask you, as our time is running out, because we see your Titanic background there in your room in your home. Your wife says she won't let you take her on a cruise, and because you might scare everybody talking about Titanic. But since you have the memorabilia, where else in your house do you just keep it all to one room, or do you have something special down in the kitchen? Do you have, what's going on behind the scenes?
I spread it around without my wife noticing. So I have pictures generally around in the lounge and the dining room, and I've got sort of a study area upstairs, which I've got where I keep all the books and what have you, and I keep it all up there as well. So it's just sort of hidden in different places under the bed.
Well, I'm going to proudly display my copy of Titanic Day by Day when it finally gets here from Amazon.
Another one for the collection.
When we get together, you'll sign it.
Yes, that sounds good. And I think that's one place I'd like to go is New York. That's my next place I'd like to go to. I'd like to get there, but.
And it's part of Titanic history. There is a lot of New York history related to the Titanic, whether it's the Strauss's memorial or the pier. So we will definitely make that happen. We're so honored that you shared your time with us today. We hope your great-grandfather rests in peace, and we're grateful for his service and his important place in history.
And we'll put a link in the notes to where to get your book. I'm assuming it's on Amazon.
Yes, it's on Amazon. Most good bookstores you can get it, but Amazon, yes, you can get it on Amazon.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Simon. Yes.
Yeah, lovely to see you both.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited.